gold and daggers and silver and pyrite and all the other valuable things.
Well, in the last story, we were just at the very end when I was explaining that sometimes Fish Face turns into submarine body in order to save himself. And then what's he called, David?
Oh, wait, I know.
Oatmeal Mouth?
Oatmeal bowl.
Oatmeal bowl, which is very useful if he's hungry. Okay, that's completely the end of that story.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could smack my head.
No, smacking your own head is not something to want to happen.
Dad, read. Yeah, the story.
All right, one more story, and then I'm all out of stories for the night and I have to recharge my batteries. You know, I really want to go to sleep early tonight.
But it's not even 8.
I know, but I didn't sleep last night.
Dad!
You.
Now do it.
All right. This is another story of Darth and Joe Vader, and I'm going to turn off the light while I tell it. So there. This is a story. Everyone lie down for this story because it's a very tiring story. This is a story of Darth and Joe Vader when Darth was 83 and Joe was...
No, not 83.
No, he was either 8 or 3. I can't remember. Oh, it was 8 minutes till he was 3. And Joe was just about to turn 1.
No.
What was just about to turn one of those ages, I mean. One of those ages where he was 7 or 8. 7.
Dad.
Yes?
When Darth was 10 and Joe was 8.
Right.
Is that the right one?
Yes, and that's when our story begins. This is a very scary yet funny...
Another shoe, but that's not his name anymore.
No, that guy is actually not in this story.
What?
Because...
Oh, why don't you put a rose petal in it?
Rose petal, shoe box, handle, nostril, ice cream, face, ear, ball? No, because when that guy gets into the story, then the story ends up just being about him and thinking of names of him. This is a different story.
Okay, what's it about?
This...
Jar Jar. Jar Jar.
Well...
I have Jar Jar.
Okay. Jar Jar?
Yeah.
All right.
That's the story I'm thinking of.
All right.
Jar Jar story. Are you recording?
Yes. Ready?
Wait, cut that out loud.
Okay.
Listening to you.
All right. I'm going to start right now.
Rewind.
So, that's a beautiful note. Once upon a time, when Darth was 10 and Joe was 8, and they were out ice skating near Mount Tamalpais, there's a big outdoor out-skating rink. Well, it's really an indoor in-skating rink, but it's outdoors and it's an ice skating rink. And they were ice skating, and Darth and Joe, because they had been trained successfully to be Jedi warriors, their balance was so great that they were really great at ice skating and every other sport. So everybody else in the arena who had cut was just standing there staring at Darth and Joe, who were flipping around and doing spins and feet over their heads and cartwheels all on the ice, all without falling over. And they were all clapping and cheering. But Darth and Joe were just having fun using their Jedi warrior ways to have fun ice skating. Well, suddenly there was a slight vibration, and Joe even almost fell over. He touched the ice with his hands. He bent down and looked, and right where he had been skating there was a crack in the ice. "There is a crack in the ice," said the official Galump, who was the man whose job it was to take care of the ice in this ice skating rink outside of Mount Tamalpais. And he looked down, they all looked down, and there was a crack opening ever wider in the ice, and steam was coming up from it. "Is it a volcano?" asked Sam Gibsonsall, who was a person they didn't really know very well, but they knew that he sold ice cream to... Apple ice cream to crows and small people who then gave it to Jar Jar. And Darth said, "It sort of looks like it could be a volcano. Everybody get back. It could be dangerous. Joe and I'll handle it." And Joe said, "Right. because danger, if we had middle names, would probably be our middle name. Right, Darth? Right, Joe. And so they noticed that the ice was shaking more and more. Should we take our ice skating skates off? Asked Joe. No, they could come in handy, said Darth. And right he was. Because suddenly, the ice sheets thrust up into the air. One half of the ice skating rink thrust up into a huge mountain. The other half slid against it. Luckily, everybody had got back. Darth and Joe, and they were flying in the air, and they managed to land on the inside of this mountain, this giant steep hill of ice, and they were skating down at 140 miles an hour, and it went right into the inside the earth. And they were skating inside the earth, and it was warm, but the ice was so freshly warmed up by the steam that it was still frozen. And because it was slightly wet from the steam, it was even faster than normal ice for skating, because there was hardly ever friction or anything slowing them down. So they kept going faster and faster and faster. Look out, Darth! Look out, Joe! And they slid around a giant rock, and they came face to face with an iguanathon, which, in case you don't know, is an underground creature in Darth and Joe's world, which is often hired by bad guys because they're not very intelligent. Their iguanathons are giant underground lizard creatures, but in this case it was a wild one, so it wasn't attacking them. And they grabbed onto its tail because they thought it was the only thing that could slow them down. They both thought of the same thing at the same time. They grabbed on the iguanathon, and the iguanathon started sliding down the ice with them. And they were sliding down the ice with a giant iguanathon, and pretty soon, whoosh, they came to a wall, and they slid up the wall, and they slid back down, they slid back and forth, back, forth, back, forth, and they finally stopped. And they were in the middle of an underground ice field, lit only by the glowing embers of hot molten magma, which is melted rock that was 13 miles away, but the light from that melted rock was so bright that it came all the way through the sheets of ice up to where they were so they could see everything. And they saw a door that was made out of mud. And they skated over to the door, and the iguanathon, which was very confused by the whole thing, skated away completely. He went on to some underground tunnel that he knew about, I guess. And they skated to the door, and they thumped on the door. I say thump because knocking sounds like this, but on a mud door it's more like this. Or so it made more of a thumping sound. And sure enough, there was a voice inside that room behind that door connected to some sort of creature, and the voice said, "May I help you?" And it was Susie McGivengollen. Susie McGivengollen had a voice that sounded like, "May I help you?" But they recognized it instantly. First of all, she was a witch. She had incredible power, and she lived underground in Darth and Joe's world. In fact, Darth and Joe had been looking for her because they thought that maybe since she lived underground anyway, and probably had a lot of control over a lot of the iguanathons, probably she could help protect the internal time clock that is always in danger, but is in the center of Darth and Joe's planet and keeps the planet spinning correctly. But so they finally met Susie McGuanathon, and she yawned. Did you hear her yawn just a second ago? That was Susie McGuanathon, because she was very tired. Why was she tired? She had a big day. Why did she have a big day? Well, she explained it to Darth and Joe. She had a big day because she's been saving the planet from being destroyed. Well, you're not doing a very good job, said Joe. There was just a giant ice volcano at the ice skating rink. It would have been a lot worse, said Susie McGuanathon. What do you mean it would have been a lot worse? It would have been a lot worse if I hadn't changed the molten magma into ice. Said Darth. You're right about that. Yes, Joe said. Sorry, I guess you are doing a good job of saving the world. I'd hate to have a real volcano erupt and kill everybody. Good thing it was just an ice volcano. That's right, said Susan McGuanagon. So, what is causing all this havoc? Well, I'm not sure about that, she said, but I think that it might have to do with somebody who is controlling the internal mechanisms of the planet. You mean the internal time clock of the planet? Asked Joe. No, she said. That's fine. I've been guarding that. Oh, great, said Darth, because we've been looking for you. We were hoping you could help guard that. We've heard of you. And I've heard of you, said Susie McGuanagon. Well, what have you heard of us? Asked Darth. I've heard... Yes, we saved the planet. You saved the planet, and we also know that you built a shield and a special locked room around the internal time clock, which I am ever so grateful for. But somebody has been messing up the magnetic ionosphere of the planet, which causes huge volcanoes and explosions, and it's everything I can do just to keep this planet from exploding and blowing up. Who would be doing such a thing? No, not Who. He's a great guy. You know Doctor Who? Of course, don't you? Yes. I knew you did. How did you know? Because he said you knew him. Oh, then why did you ask if we knew him? I didn't. Oh, okay, well that was very confusing. So, what's the name of the... don't say what, because we know... But what's a great guy to... Okay. We want to know, said Darth and Joe, the name of the person behind all this evilness. And she said, so would I. So would I. All I can say is it's not Monoculus, because Monoculus, I've heard, has become a good guy ever since you guys helped out the Oculuses. That's right, said Joe. So what is it? It's some other one-eyed guy.
Who's Monoculus?
Monoculus is the father of Bioculus, who is the father of Trioculus. Or maybe it's the... Right, Quadoculus, actually. And the thing is that a long time ago, Darth and Joe helped out the Oculuses, and they all became good guys, except then there was a new and improved Trioculus who was a bad guy. He became a good guy eventually, and then there was a newer, even improved Trioculus, some other guy with 3 eyes. Now there's some other guy with 1 eye. Could it be, thought Darth? Could it be, thought Joe? They thought a lot, those guys. I mean, they thought a lot alike. Could it be a new improved Monoculus?
Who would remove one of their eyes?
Who could remove one of their eyes?
Who would?
One of whose eyes?
One of somebody's eyes.
Oh,
2 eyes, they have to move one in the middle and take away that one.
only if he started off with 2 eyes, but Monoculus started off with 1 eye. He's what we call a Cyclops. He only had 1 eye to begin with. But we have to find out. We have to find out who's behind all this. How can we figure it out?
Who's behind all this?
Oh.
I don't think who is behind all this.
No, you're absolutely right, whoever you are. What we have to find out is where the problem is coming
And not
from.
who.
You're right. Voice coming from somewhere. And so what they did was they asked her if she kept records of all the natural disasters that aren't really natural that have been occurring on the planet, all the volcanoes and explosions, and she said she had. And they examined them, and they transported, the 3 of them transported up to the basement where Joe had his laboratory in Darth's mom's house basement, and they looked, and it looked like, if you mathematically look at all of the volcano explosions and all of the other kind of disasters that have been close calls, almost destroying the planet, they all have one center. They all go back. You can trace them back to one place, 13 miles, 13.2 to precise miles under the ground, which is exactly a unit of monoculium, which is the name of the planet that Monoculus came from. Anyway, exactly 1 monoculium, or 13.2 miles, under the planet, under the Sea of Babylon.
But who did it?
Well, they did not who, but with somebody, and not somebody probably. So they decided, they knew it was some one-eyed creepy guy, and they knew where it was all coming from. That's all we need to know, said Darth. That's all we need to know, said Joe. And Susie Guanacala said, whoa, but don't you want to know how you can defeat him? Said Darth, good point. Said Joe. Let's just go there and wing it, which is an expression that means just make it up as we go along. All right, she said, I'm right behind you, and she disappeared. Hey, where is she? I'm right behind you, and they looked. Oh, you're behind us. Yeah, okay, let's go. And they all took off. We're going to transport there. I'm going to fly there invisibly, she said. Good thinking. And they transported 13.2 miles, or 1 unit from Monoculus's world, under the planet, under the sea of...
How did you fly under the planet?
Well, she lives under the planet. That's her specialty, is underground flight. It's also known as supersonic digging. But she creates these tunnels that close up after her, kind of like wormholes through space. So she's actually in a tunnel, but as she goes along, it closes up behind her, so there's no trace of her. So that's the mechanism of how she does it. So they went there, and sure enough, there was a round glass building underground, like a complete sphere, and they could see right into it. There was a lot of electricity and a lot of rays and beams and lights coming out, and suddenly they heard a laugh. Wait a minute. I thought that finally I would meet you, Susie Gwinogalis. I don't see you anywhere, but my sensors indicate that something came at high speed, and I know it must be you, so it's time for me to put up my defenses by chopping underground meat-crushing destroyers. And suddenly, these giant metal mouths, huge ones, came out from underground. They started chomping the ground everywhere. And Darth and Joe said, look out, their metal teeth. Let's transport inside. But they couldn't transport inside because the electric field wouldn't let them inside. There has to be a door. They went to the top of it, and they kept looking out. They were using their Jedi tricks to look out for the teeth. They had no idea where Susie was. She could be eaten by these metal things for all they knew. And finally, they saw the door of this thing. How are we going to get into it? I don't know. Use your lightsaber. And fling! Darth smashed one of the metal teeth. Joe dived under it, and they flipped the door open and landed inside the giant glass sphere, which was a giant building underground where all this was coming from. And when they got there, Susie was already there, and she had the new improved monoculus around the neck, and she had her hand over his one eye, and he was saying, I can't see, please let me go. And she said, not until you apologize for repeatedly almost destroying the planet. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, but I'm a bad guy, that's my job. Okay, I'll let your eye go. Thank you, because there's something about my eye you don't realize. I have a death ray! And he zapped it at Darth and Joe because he saw that they had come in, and they flipped out of the way with their Jedi chips, and they landed behind him. And he said, huh? Because Joe tapped him on the shoulder, and he turned around, and Darth punched him in the eyeball, and he said, ow! That's my eye you just punched! Can't you leave a fella and his eye alone? I can't see anything. And Susie McGonagall said, here, have a seat. And she shoved a chair behind him. He sat down, and Darth tied him up with a rope, and they put a blindfold over his death ray eyeball. And they flipped off the switch of the giant chompers, and they turned off his machine, and they transported him, and Susan McGonagall just followed them. They transported him all the way up to the surface of the planet, where they had him arrested, and his crime, trying to destroy the planet repeatedly and trying to kill Susan McGonagall with giant chomping teeth, and Darth and Joe with a death ray from his eyeball. And he went to a special prison where there were mirrors around, so if his eyeball ever sent out a death ray, it would bounce back and destroy him, so he had to be very careful not to do it. And that's where they kept him. And they kept him there a long time.
And you can't see because he'll bounce into that one direction.
Well, he has to have light also to create the death ray beam, and they keep it very dark in there. The Fend? But they feed him lots of nutrients, so he doesn't need as much light as other people.
No. It's what?
The Defend?
No. The beginning.
Of the end.
No.
It really is the end.
No, it was a funny.
Okay, you guys. Aaron's going to check the time. It's after 8, I bet. All right, that's it. I'm hanging up shop. What? Once upon a time, Lord, Darth and Joe were downstairs in the basement, and Joe was cutting up catalogs to make a book, and Darth was playing with magnets. Because Darth and Joe Vader were 7 and 5 years old at the time, they like to play like other creatures who are 7 and 5 years old, even though they are training to be Jedi warriors. Well, suddenly, when Joe was cutting up the magazine, he came across an interesting advertisement. It said, only 25 Gurgleem, which is a unit of payment on Jupiter. Only 25 Gurgleem for your own super light speed spaceship. And Joe said, huh? That must be a misprint. How could a spaceship only cost 25 Gurgleem? A Gurgleem is equal to about a little more than a cent. So that was only about 25 or 30 cents. And Darth hiccuped. He was so surprised. And he looked, and he dropped his magnets. And he looked over at the catalog, and they both looked at the piece of paper, and Joe tore it out of the catalog so they could get a good look at it. He just tore, and he picked it up. First he tore it out. and he handed it, and then he decided he better cut it so that he didn't. Oh, there it goes. But he says, I don't want to mess up the catalog because I'm also making a book, so I'm just going to cut out that one ad, okay? And he cut it out. And they held it up to the light, and sure enough, it said, only 25 gurgling for your own super light speed spaceship. Only Jedi. This is a special deal only for Jedis in training. Huh? Darth said. That sounds strange. We're Jedis in training, said Joe. All right, let's go redeem the coupon. We have 25 gurgling between the two of us. Heck, I have 36 gurgling right here, said Darth. So Darth packed up his magnets, and they flew to Jupiter to see what kind of spaceship they could get for 25 gurgling. And end of chapter 1. Well, for chapter 2, Darth and Joe's new little sister, whose name that is Laura, her name. She was at home cutting out pictures of interesting dolls and trees and plants from her catalog herself. But they decided that she was too young to go on this little adventure to Jupiter. So, although for her first birthday they did give her a plastic lightsaber, which she loved to play with, and she was getting really good at it. So they thought that maybe even before she was 2 years old, they could probably give her a small real lightsaber because she was so good at the play one. And so they were on their way to Jupiter, and they saw a big sign floating near one of the moons. I think it was Ganymede. And the sign said, redeem your supersonic spaceship, your supersonic lightspeed spaceship coupon here. And it had an arrow pointing down to the surface of Jupiter. Well, Jupiter is a gaseous planet, as you know, but when they followed the arrow, they saw that there was a floating space station in the atmosphere, and they docked their spaceship, which means landed and attached to the space station, which was a large flat piece of metal. And they got inside, and there were more arrows saying, redeem your coupon here. And Darth started getting a little suspicious. This is really a strange way to sell a spaceship, isn't it? But Joe thought, we have to see what it is. And Darth said, yeah, that's right. Anyway, Jedi warriors, but even ones in training, don't shy away from an adventure, even as suspicious as this one is. And they kept walking down the corridor, and the sign had them turn right, then left, then right, then left to the body, then right up a large step of stairs, then down a slide, then down a pole, then up a pole, then into a giant...
A test for the Jedi
pretend
warriors.
nose. It was a test? Yes, just to make sure they really were Jedi warriors in training. And they walked through a large paper mache nose, and they had to choose which nostril. The nostril, left nostril or right nostril. And there were arrows, the nostrils were flashing. And they didn't know which nostril to go to because the sign didn't say. They looked, and the nostrils led to separate places. And then a sign came down, and the sign said in their own language, choose a nostril. And Darth said, I know. Let's see which nostril is more magnetic, and that one probably has a metal spaceship in it. So he opened up his magnet kit, and he pulled out a very powerful magnet, and he held it in front of the left nostril, and nothing. And then he held it in front of the right nostril, and he really felt it pull. And in fact, all the magnets in his kit started vibrating when he was in front of the right nostril. So he figured that was probably the right way to go. So they decided to go down that nostril. And sure enough, there was a gleaming spaceship there. It was a big silver ship. It looked very nice indeed. It was pretty round, and it looked like it might well be a supersonic lightspeed spaceship. So Darth and Joe started saying, hello, is anybody here? We brought the coupon. And a man with a big mustache, and we're talking about 3 feet away from his body, the end of the mustache, so big that each side of his mustache had a helper holding it up in the air, who was shorter than him, but who held the tips of the mustache up with their arm, came out and said, well, you must be the people who are redeeming the coupon. he start to say our name? Darth asked Joe. Yeah, it sounded like it, said Joe. Let's just play along. Yes, we found this coupon in our catalog, and we decided to buy the spaceship for 25 Googleem. Well, let's see your Googleem. And they hand him 25 Googleem. Actually, we have 26. Can you make change? In fact, well, no. Darth said, you can keep the change. This spaceship looks like it's worth much more than 26 Googleem anyway. Thank you very much. But I do have change right here. Let me give it to you. He gave him a Googleem in change, right? And then Darth and Joe, he said, please, step into your new spaceship. And Darth turned around to say, Mr. Mustache Man, why are you giving away a spaceship for only 25 Googleem? But as he started to turn and say that, the door shut, and Darth and Joe were alone inside the spaceship. I don't like the looks of this, said Joe. I don't like the sound of this, said Darth. And it was the sound of paper rustling and metal parts shaking. And it was the sound of the spaceship taking off. And so they sat down. There were 2 seats, and they said, let's sit down in the seats and see where this baby's going. Baby? We left the baby at home. You know what I mean, said Darth. This spaceship. All right. They sat down, and the spaceship took off, and it started flying. And Darth said, well, let's take the controls. And he started trying to steer toward their home planet, but of course the controls failed to work. The spaceship was completely on autopilot. They couldn't control it at all. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, and the very cheap 25 Googleem spaceship. So Darth and Joe were in this spaceship, and they couldn't control where it went. They had left their old spaceship on the planet's surface, where they had, on the space station surface, where they had landed to buy this new spaceship, and they were really worried that they didn't have any idea where they were going, and they looked in the screens to see what was happening, and all they could see was that they seemed to be heading toward a place in the sky that had no stars. There were stars all around except this one kind of black circular hole that had no stars at all, and they started going faster and faster. Darth, said Joe. Yeah, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Well, I tend to think what you think. Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
We're getting sucked into a black hole.
That's exactly what I was thinking, said Darth. Yes, so was I, said Joe. We're getting sucked into a black hole, and there's nothing we can do about it because this is some sort of horrible trick. Well, we knew it was going to be a trick, said Darth. We just had to see what was going on, and at least we know who was behind the whole thing. Who? The large mustache man. Oh, yeah.
Who wasn't behind all of this?
Oh, good point, whoever just said that. Or, well, that wasn't who at all. So anyway, they're getting sucked into this black hole, and when you go into a black hole, unfortunately, it tends to crush the spaceship into a thin, tiny line of matter, and you do get sucked out into a white hole, but unless you're in a special black hole device for traveling, like a rainbow hole spaceship, you'll be crushed and destroyed and turned into pure energy. And that's not exactly what they had in mind that afternoon. They really would rather much just go to a restaurant and have cheese sandwiches and broccoli sprouts. But they were faced with this dilemma. If we could only steer this thing. I know, said Joe, the blaster. That's right. Darth and Joe had this blaster gun that was very powerful. That Darth had. That if they could just blast off the side of their spaceship, it could maybe deflect them a little bit, so they wouldn't go straight into the black hole, and maybe they would whip around the side of it and get flung away from it at super speed, so they wouldn't actually go into the black hole itself. So they got up and they went over to the garbage chute, which is where the trash is expelled and shot into stars of spaceships, because a lot of spaceships, they don't have really good ways of recycling all of their trash, and so they shoot the trash in capsules into nearby stars and it just gets burned up. So they attached Darth's blast gun into that side into the garbage chute, and Darth blasted into space, and the force from the gun pushed the spaceship just a little bit, and he did it again and pushed a little bit more, and they just barely missed the black hole, and they whizzed around, whoosh, and they were flung off into space. They still didn't have much control over the spaceships. The controls weren't working at all, and the computer had a readout that said malfunction, destination black hole has been missed, destination black hole has been missed, and the computer turned off, and now nothing was working at all. And so Joe looked underneath the control panel, and he disconnected the computer from the manual controls, and he reconnected it so that now they could use the controls of the spaceship. And they flew the spaceship back toward Jupiter. But then Joe said, "Hey, they're going to see us coming. Isn't there a way we can put a cloaking device on this thing?" "Yeah," said Darth. "Let's take it home and put the cloaking device from our spaceship, spaceship, on this one."
They could divide the cloaking device.
Yeah, they could actually, yeah, so that they could install it on this spaceship too. So they flew home to their planet, and they figured that probably whoever.
They didn't say that.
Well, they were thinking that, and probably probably whoever was trying to kill Darth and Joe thinks that they flew into the black hole. Not who, but whoever might be his name, and we don't know for sure. All we know is that the large mustache man sold them the spaceship for a very cheap price indeed of 25 googling and a coupon. And so they got home and they adjusted the cloaking device so it would work on this new silvery spaceship of theirs.
The old one.
Well, the old one, yes. I mean, you know, the old one will still work on the old spaceship, but they just doubled the components so that it would work on the new spaceship as well. And they installed it, and it worked perfectly. And they stopped at a coffee shop which had a lot of newspapers and magazines, and looked at a copy of the same kind of catalog that Joe had been cutting up before, which sounded like this when he was wrestling the papers or cutting up the catalog. And they picked one up, and they looked inside it. Actually, it was the sound of the paper shuffling around. That it was because they were looking for the same coupon in a different copy of the catalog. And they flipped through the pages, and the coupon wasn't there. It turns out that they figured that coupon was only in the copy of the catalog that went to Darth and Joe's house. That all the other copies that were for sale did not have that coupon for the spaceship in it. So somebody knew that they would be the ones who got that catalog and that coupon. Who, and I don't mean it the person who, but who would have thought of such an evil thing? And somebody who knew where they lived. Well, of course, Trioculus knows where we live, said Joe. Yeah, but as we both know, he's in prison right now. That's true, I'm meaning the new improved Trioculus. And the old Trioculus is a good guy. I wonder, we've got to find out. We've got to go back to the mustache man. That's right. But let's wear a disguise. And so they went back.
That
Yes?
is new improved Trioculus or someone else new improved?
Well, it could have been. But they decided to go find out from the mustache guy. So what they did is they decided, since they were going to fly in an invisible spaceship, that they would also wear disguises. So they went to get their trusty dog. Just last week, Darth and Joe had actually they didn't have a dog yet, but they knew somebody who had a dog who shed an awful lot. And every time you combed her, huge, or even petted her, huge amounts of hair, it was a Kiva from planet Earth. So Darth and Joe quickly, they decided there wasn't even enough time to fly there. They transported to planet Earth, and they went and visited the house of Mr. E and some other people who lived there, and a Kiva, and they petted and petted.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery who he is, exactly. And they decided, and his mother was there too, and they petted and combed the Akiva dog until they had a ton of fur everywhere. And they carefully created, and Mr. E's mother helped them make it, gigantic mustaches out of the dog fur. And they stuck them right under their noses. And in fact, Darth used a magnetic kit to help, because he put metal fibers to help hold the mustache together, and he used magnets to hold it together, so he had to wrestle around just for the right exact magnet in his kit to help with the disguise. They found it, and they attached the mustaches, and they very carefully they had to turn sideways to get through the door of the house to get back outside, because the mustaches were now not as big as a giant mustache man's mustache, but larger than any other mustaches they had ever seen, and they were Kiva colored, and they transported back to their spaceship, and then they landed on the space station in Jupiter where they had been before, where they had purchased that spaceship they were now in, although now it was invisible. And they walked out, and they walked down, went through the right nostril, and knocked on a door because there was nobody there, but they saw there was a light coming from underneath the door. And a large mustache man, well, first, one of his helpers peered through and got all excited when he saw the mustaches and closed it and opened the door, and there was a large mustache man, and he said, "Oh, who are you?" And I don't mean that as the name Doctor Who, I just mean, who are you? You must be relatives of mine. My name is Galapagos. Are you my relatives, Galapagos? Asked Darth and Joe. Yes, we are long-lost cousins, said Darth. My name is Argus, and his name is Ojukut. Oh, I'm so happy to meet you, Argus and Oglekuga. Would you like some tea? I have special mustache tea. It's quite delicious. That's all right. We're not really that hungry right now. So what have you been up to? Well, I just killed Darth and Joe Vader, the famous Jedi warriors in training, and I got paid a large sum of money. And Joe said, how much, 25 Googleym? Huh? No, that's how I tricked them into getting my spaceship of destruction to them. But no, I was paid 50 million and 3.5 Googleym for this job. Wow, cousin, that is great work. Google, the large mustache man said, by the way, you two have very nice mustaches. May I touch? Oh, yes, and he stroked their mustaches, and they stroked his. Oh, very nice mustaches indeed. And Darth and Joe said, so we'd like to meet the person who paid you all that money. Maybe we can work with you in destroying other good guys in the universe. Well, I don't mind destroying people as long as the price is right, said the large mustache man. And he said, I'll call him right over. I'd like him to meet you guys. Okay, and so he called them over. And about 17 minutes later, a spaceship landed outside the maze of hallways and nostril headquarters of the large mustache man, and in walked a very tall man with only one eye in the middle of his head, but it was not monoculus. It was not even the new and improved monoculus, but it was clearly from the same species as monoculus, because he only had one eye in the center of his head. And he said, allow me to introduce myself, and by the way, it's great meeting other large mustache people, because my mustachioed friend here has been great in helping me destroy two of my worst enemies that didn't even know they were my enemies, because I wanted to get rid of them before I even started my life of crime. Wow, what is your name? Asked Joe, pretending to be Ojika, and Darth pretended to be Arthur. And he said, my name is the vastly newly improved monoculus. There were a couple of other monoculuses before me. They were bad guys, but none of them really ever raised themselves or lowered themselves to the level of cruelty as I. I am the worst and cruelest and meanest and most despicable, horrible, despotable monoculus of all time that will ever be, and I will destroy all the Jedi warriors, 1, 2, 3, or 7 at a time if it takes it. And now that I've proved myself by destroying Darth and Joe Vader, who were the most famous good guys in the world, all other bad guys will respect me and all other good guys will fear me. Well, at that point, Darth and Joe looked at each other and said, well, that is just great, new, vastly improved monoculus, but there's one flaw in your plan. What? I don't think I have any flaws in my plan. My plan is perfect. And Darth said, and Darth and Joe pulled off their their mustaches, which made both of them say ouch at the same time, and said, you haven't destroyed Darth and Joe. That's your problem. Huh? What? How is this possible? And the large mustachioed man said, Darth and Joe are also large mustachioed men? No, they were wearing disguises, said the vastly improved monoculus, and he pulled out a lightsaber, and Darth and Joe started fighting him off with their mustaches. But they decided to throw the mustaches aside, and they poked the large mustachioed man in both eyes with the ends of the tips of their mustaches, and then they pulled out their lightsabers, and they started fighting monoculus, and pretty soon they heard some sirens, and all of a sudden there were tons of police officers surrounding the place. Huh? Who called the police? We called the police. What? And Darth, just as Joe managed to flip the lightsaber out of the vastly new improved Monoculus's hand, and Darth managed to trip him so he fell backwards and then tie him up. And Joe tied up the large mustachioed man with his own mustache, by the way. And the little helpers ran off, and so Joe transported to the other side of them, and then they ran the other way, and Darth transported that side of them, and then they ran the other way, and Joe transported right in front of them, and then the other way, and Darth transported right in front of them, and pretty soon they were right next to them, and they handcuffed them with 2 sets of handcuffs that they brought with them. So the helpers were even captured. And how did all the police get there? "Thanks for calling us," said the police captain to Darth and Joe. "Oh, it was no problem," said Darth. "We've put these magnetic transmitters in our fake mustaches. That's why the wire fibers were in the mustaches, because they had built radio antennas into their mustaches." And that is what so the police were able to hear the entire conversation, and they heard the confession of the vastly improved monoculus bad guy and the mustachioed guy about how they had tried to kill Darth and Joe. And so the police knew that they had done it, and they captured them. And that is why Darth and Joe used the magnets. And by the way, when they were fighting with their mustaches, because of the metal in them, it sounded just like this. And then they used and then when they used their mustache against the lightsaber, it sounded sort of like this. But they started getting chopped up. But then they saved the other ends to poke the eye of the mustachioed man and used their own lightsabers to defeat the vastly improved monoculus. So that is how Darth and Joe.
The end of first chapter.
Yes, but it happens to also be the end of the story, since all the bad guys were captured.
There's more bad guys in the story.
Oh yes, well the 2 little helper guys, they were only giving short sentences because their only crime was holding up the mustache of the very large mustachioed man at the end. Once upon a time, Darth and Joe Vader were attacked by Zaphaloids. Start at the beginning. Okay. Once upon a time, Darth and Joe Vader were at home when they received a distress call from the Jedi training planet asking them to come in right away because there was another planet in trouble. So they quickly flew to the Jedi training planet, which, as you know, is an alternate dimension in a certain place in space, so bad guys don't know where it's located. And Darth and Joe flew there, and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda quickly grabbed them, and Yoda said, "Yoda, tell Darth and Joe what Darth and Joe must do for Darth and Joe's mission." And Obi-Wan Kenobi said, "No, it's all right, Yoda, I'll tell them." And Yoda said, "No, Yoda, tell Darth and Joe what Yoda say to Darth and Joe." "Right, thank you, Yoda. Now let me tell you, Darth and Joe, it's very important," said Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yoda's turn to tell Darth and Joe adventure. Yoda has to tell Yoda. Listen, Yoda, I appreciate your help, but really I know a lot about this mission, said Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I think that I should be the one who tell Darth and Joe exactly what they're supposed to do. Yoda, want to tell Darth? Okay, Yoda, you tell Darth and Joe. Good. Yoda, tell Darth and Joe what Yoda say to Darth and Joe. That is what Yoda say to Darth and Joe, which is the name of the mission. This mission is called Attack of the Zaphaloids. Why is it called Attack of the Zaphaloids? Asked Darth. Yeah, asked Joe. This mission is called Attack of the Zaphaloids because Zaphaloids attack Darth and Joe. When do Zaphaloids attack Darth and Joe? Right now, said Yoda. And suddenly, the roof tore off the building, and thousands of Zaphaloids came flying in. Zaphaloids are huge birds of prey with giant claws and humongous beaks, and they're all controlled by one main Zaphaloid, who actually lives on another planet. In the past, the main Zaphaloid, which you can call a king or a queen, but Zaphaloids aren't boys or girls, they're just Zaphaloids. But the main Zaphaloid always had to be in the same dimension as the attacking Zaphaloids, but now it seemed like somehow they were able to attack through dimensions, and they were attacking the Jedi training planet even as Darth and Joe were there asking what their mission was. Suddenly, the roof, as I was saying, the roof is being torn off buildings. Zaphaloids are picking Yoda up. And it was true. A Zaphaloid had picked Yoda up in its beak by the back of his cloak and was carrying through the air when quickly Obi-Wan Kenobi used his Jedi powers to lower the Zaploid to the ground that was holding Yoda. But then two Zaploids picked up the sleeves of Obi-Wan Kenobi and started lifting him into the air. And so Yoda started using his Jedi powers to lower those Zaploids. But pretty soon, there were more and more Zaploids coming, and Darth and Joe had no choice but to use their powers to flip outside the building. Strangely enough, the Zaploids sounded like this. Say Zaphaloid. Say Zaphaloid. That's how Zaphaloids talk. So maybe the Zaphaloids could understand Darth and Joe if they spoke in their language. Because it sounds like they have some kind of language. They kept saying hello. See that? They sounded sort of like a little kid, even as they were attacking. So Darth and Joe started using their Goog's powers to communicate with the Zaphaloids. And they said, "Can you please stop attacking us?" And the Zaphaloid said, "No, we need to attack you because we're being told to attack you by the main Zaphaloid." And they started yelling like that. And then they got really angry, and they said, they laughed when they were angry. Yeah. And so suddenly, one of the Zaphaloid's telephones rang, and he picked it up, and he started talking to the main Zaphaloid. And he said, okay. And this is the conversation he had with the main Zaphaloid. You do? You want a bath?
Bath.
Oh. And Darth and Joe overheard it, and Obi-Wan, who was being lifted up in the air by 7 Zaphaloids, said, "What did he say? What did he say?" And Darth and Joe said, "The main Zaphaloid said, keep attacking." "But he talked over the phone. We have to get that phone from him." "Okay." And so Darth and Joe flipped over. They both flipped, and they grabbed the telephone, and that really got the Zaphaloid angry. "Hey, you took my phone."